Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. You're hearing your Monday host, Ethan, talking to you once again all about the college football atmosphere, man. We're back and better than ever. Well, probably not better than ever, but at least we're back, right? College football is back, and it seems like we're about to be back in Power 5 totality here, as a lot of news-breaking events has happened over the past week. Biggest being about the Big Ten and even the Pac-12 coming back. So the Big Ten decision to kick off in late October left a number of things to chew on as the conference moves forward. So the Big Ten is back from the brink of 2020 oblivion. And thanks to that of an 11th hour effort to get upgraded medical protocols and from a lot of public pressure. So like after Kevin Warren was joined in a Wednesday press conference by Northwestern President Morton Scapiro, athletic directors Barry Alvarez and Sandy Barbour, and Jim Phillips from Northwestern, and a bunch of medical advisory group chairmen. 10 items of interest from the dramatic and divisive period in the oldest and richest college football league in the Big Ten. Here it is. So in just 6 weeks, the Big Ten went from claiming it wouldn't safely play, or it couldn't safely play because of heart-related issues and the inability to test contact trace appropriately, to announcing an October kickoff to the season. So the things that changed really was that the doctors changed their medical opinion, according to Big Ten officials, due to advancements in testing and deeper knowledge of myocarditis. I think that's how it's pronounced, the heart disease, the myocarditis. The medical advice changes, so the facts change and the minds change, says Shapiro. And then number 2, Warren doesn't want to talk about the past. He's moving forward and did his best Wednesday to dance around questions about this 6-week ordeal in which lawsuits were filed, attacks were made, and even a protest, though small, broke out in front of the Big Ten headquarters. And one of the easy things to do is turn around, look back and say what was poor and what was good. And he says that they're passionate in the Big Ten, and he takes that as a positive. So the third thing is that the Big Ten is playing 9 games in 9 weeks. After all the talk about safety and athlete health care, is that really safe? So a reporter Wednesday wisely asked the question during a conference call with Ohio State team physician James Brochers. We know what's in the significant number of games, but it isn't done. In the past, says the athletic director, physical physician. Our medical subcommittee recommended it was safe to move forward. The Big Ten has many high-level players opt out in any league. Some of them may now opt back in. Ohio State's tandem of offensive guard Wyatt Davis and defensive back Shaun Wade have been in contact with the school, sources told Sports Illustrated. Rondell Moore could have a pathway to return to Purdue. Others could do the same. So obviously, signing with an agent or accepting benefits from one would greatly complicate matters in terms of NCAA compliance. But lawyer Tom Mars, who has been in the thick of the Big Ten fight, could wind up representing players in a situation of trying to regain eligibility. Mars pointed Wednesday to the case that Arizona State punter Michael Turk, who had his eligibility restored in June after going undrafted and unsigned in the NFL. And the caveat there is that Turk had not signed with an agent. The fifth thing is that the Big Ten said that the league was unanimous in decision to reverse course and play football this fall. There was no unanimity of enthusiasm. So look no further than Rutgers' Tippett statement. So when it came without names of the president, athletic director, or the head coach attached, it read in part, assessments of the conditions at Rutgers as well as those of each opponent have been made regarding all upcoming games. Individual universities may suspend the return to competition on a week-to-week basis if they or their scheduled opponents are experiencing significant negative changes among players and staff or within the broader university community. And it was just last week when President Jonathan Holloway showed a clear dislike for the idea of playing football this fall in comments to NewJersey.com. So if I'm wrong, this is him quoted, if I'm wrong because I was erring on the side of safety, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think I'm wrong, though. I just don't think it. And if I had to put money down, we're going to see some radical changes within a month, no later than October. And I'm really worried about where we're heading toward on just college campuses in general, not just sports, is deeply concerning. Holloway wasn't the only president conflicted by the process. Northwestern Shapiro, head of the Big Ten's Council and Presidents and Chambers, admitted that this was a difficult decision. It wasn't about political pressure, he says, in the return to play. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about anyone else was doing. Even a week ago, I wasn't convinced to be a part of this going forward. I've been grappling with this every day, including the call last night. And if we could play football safely and are able to do it, I don't see any reason not to go forward. The sixth reason, daily testing of players is planned to start no later than September 30th. And the Ohio State team doctor gave this source out, but full 20-hour week practices will start immediately per Wisconsin Athletic Director Barry Alvarez, and this leaves a gap up to 2 weeks wherein testing will be less rigorous. So Indiana, however, announced that it will begin daily testing this coming Thursday, but with games not starting until October 23rd through the 24th, the 21-day window of being withheld from play would seemingly allow a player to test positive before October and still be able to compete in the season opener. The seventh one of the strange karmic twists of the saga is that Big Ten's path back to playing was in large part cleared by Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott, who announced on September 3rd that his conference had partnered with Quidel for daily testing of league athletes. And that was hailed as a game changer, and it would be changing the game more for the Big Ten and the Pac-12. As of Wednesday, the Pac-12 remains hamstrung by state and local regulations that are not allowing half the league, basically. So UCLA, USC, California, Stanford, Oregon State to even practice. And there are also raging wildfires in two of those states that have periodically suspend workouts in other sports due to unsafe air quality. Ultimately, the Pac-12 may have been helped others more than it could help itself at the time, right? Remember. Number 8, the Big Ten's hurdles are not quite over and not near over. In fact, the conference didn't build any bye weeks within potential game interruptions. The league also has a 21-day suspension for play for players testing positive and has the shutdown threshold of 5% positivity rate on a team. So why the 21-day return period for positive? Players cannot return without a multi-step heart screening process. The screening can't take place until 14 days from a positive. Add that time to acclimation period and you get 21. And then number 9, the Big Ten's decision to add a round of East versus West games on what will be the last weekend of the regular season, December 18th through the 19th, gives everyone a theoretical 9th game. The matchups of division champions, then division runner-ups, and then third place teams and so on are a novel approach that could generate some interest. They could be bitterly cold. So assume the championship game will be played indoors like Lucas Oil Stadium in the Indianapolis Colts home stadium and is scheduled to be booked on a Sunday the 20th for a game against the Texans. But there are other options. So what about other games? There are some other indoor options, but playing outdoors in Minneapolis, Madison, East Lansing, Ann Arbor, or State College in the latter half of December sounds pretty brutal. Another problem for all the leagues with playing 3 weeks into December, final week was supposed to be a scat-resent, a no-play zone as colleges attempt to uphold at least the appearance of academic priority, and this year that's out the window. So despite the Big Ten black eye lately, Warren and company believe that the league did the right thing, and while other conferences showed patience and expected advancements in testing, delayed their seasons instead of completely postponing, the Big Ten pulled the trigger on postponing and then had to reverse course for a public relations nightmare. And that's just kind of how, things basically went for the Big Ten and the Pac-12. So, real quick on the Pac-12, actually, as we get real into this whole thing. The Pac-12 are also eyeing Halloween as a restart date. So, a day after the Big Ten announced its fall football season was back on, the Pac-12 is now looking to follow suit, and the league is targeting October 31st for its first week of games. The path toward a Halloween start date is pending approval from university presidents and adjustments of local health restrictions. The Big Ten will play its first game, of course, the weekend of October 24th, and per Wilner, the three primary hurdles to clear to make the date feasible are local health restrictions approved by the CEOs and reaching consensus in regards for training camp schedules. Pac-12 medical advisors have informed the league that players need 6 weeks to prepare for games, a 2-week ramp-up period followed by 4 weeks of full contact training camp. Some within the conference are discussing shortening the time frame to 5 weeks, though Wilner reports 6 weeks is more likely to happen. A breakthrough in the Pac-12's path toward being able to be having availability in the daily antigen testing program, which has been more rampant, same-day turnaround time. Teams will not be allowed to start full contact practices until the daily antigen tests are made available, which will be at the end of September. And at the local level, the Los Angeles schools have not been given clearance to practice, but the Bay Area schools, or have been, and the Bay Area schools have not. So with uncertainty still around, Wilner calls a potential start date October 31st or November 7th. The most likely dates by far in the conference title game be held December 19th. So the Pac-12 is trying to get on board with this as well. And overall, my thoughts on this are, I guess you're just going to have to live and die by whatever you choose to do. Or you don't have to. Of course, you can always change decisions. People just thought that once it's made, it's made. And it seemed like that, right? The Big Ten commissioner definitely made it look, listen, guys, we're going to sit down. It is what it is. At the end of the day, they rather be wrong while being safe rather than being wrong trying to push for a season, and that didn't last very long. In fact, it only lasted about 6 weeks, and they say it wasn't public pressure that forced them to do it, and partially I believe them, it wasn't public pressure, but I will say there was some pressure because of the games. I think the games and seeing how it went down, it wasn't a nightmare. The football wasn't weird per se. They just saw that this was something that they could maybe ease themselves into. But I think there's a lot of problems within the ethics about this personally, just because of how things are going on at different college campuses and, testing rates are going up, and then people are testing positive in different areas. You're already hearing places like the UK where the second wave is basically starting up again, and we're hearing about the virus vaccines are kind of having some setbacks here or there depending on which, company is trying to make said vaccine. You're just hearing a lot coming in and out of things that doesn't sound too promising, but I will say that every sports league has the right to try, and everybody has the right to, say that, hey, I want to try this. And, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are saying, hey, we're going to go and try it this time and not think that this is the end all be all. When we get closer to October and things, hopefully the country is at a better place for one. But if it's around where it is right now, I would assume that football will return to the Big Ten and Pac-12. But if it gets worse, it's very possible that they could just shut it down again. So I'm a little bit hesitant to think that this is going to be a foregone thing, that it's going to happen. I just I wasn't sure football was coming back at all until I saw them hit the field. So I would taper my expectations because some things are kind of finical and you never really know what's going to happen until they get on the field and do what needs to happen. You know what I'm saying? So take that as you will. We're going to take our first break, and coming out, we're going to talk about what happened in week 3 as far as games and things that I saw. GSMC.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC College Football Nation. We are back and we're talking about what went down week 3. Week 3 was a wild ride. There's a lot of things that ended up transpiring more so than I thought would happen. And there were some big wins across the board there. So let's talk about it. So in week 3, what games did I really tune into? The early games were kind of a drag, right? Basically a big old drag. And I gotta say, some of them were more entertaining than I thought they would be, but to be completely honest, there just wasn't a whole lot to write home about in the beginning of Saturday. It was more of the same. You saw similar scores and similar outcomes you could have just honestly predicted. So let's get into it, if you know what I mean. So first few slates that were like Tulsa and Oklahoma State. I watched that game. I was flipping channels between Oklahoma State, Tulsa, and what else? There were some more games. I watched a little bit of the Louisiana Georgia State game, which was honestly bananas, right? Because Louisiana got a big win last week against a ranked team. And maybe, Iowa State just was not very good. But Georgia State came in the first 2 quarters and first half and was up 14-7. Things were looking kind of crazy. And then Louisiana ended up fighting back. Then they was tied 21-21 going into the third, at the end of the third. And then in the fourth, they both had a score for 7-7. And then near the back end, of course, they went into OT and Louisiana ended up winning it all. Was an interesting game. I have to say, Louisiana gets their second big win, at least adding a little bit of legitimacy because they did face a bit of adversity in this Georgia State game. And Georgia State has moments where they like to try and knock people off, and Louisiana wasn't having it today. 2-0 in the Sun Belt. This is a really good start for this Louisiana Raging Cajuns team. A game that I was paying attention to, of course, was to see what 25 ranked Pittsburgh was going to do. And I got to admit, I wasn't too impressed with what I saw out of Pittsburgh initially. And at least from a wide receiver running back standpoint, because Pickett had a lot of balls just dropped. And apparently this has been something that's been going on for him for a while. And it just was not the best. It was not the best performance out of his teammates, let alone just the team in general. You know, he had a 25 of 36 day, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and there were a lot of drops to go around. So, it's really not acceptable. Granted, these teams look like they didn't have a whole lot of time to get right, I feel, and defenses have looked a bit stronger this week in comparison. Syracuse defense looked pretty decent for majority of the day. They held Pitt to 21 points, which I think is a testament to what they were able to do, because Pitt's offense is supposed to have some players and like some guys that can really juice and put some numbers up. And Kenny Pickett is one of the better quarterbacks within the ACC. So you could imagine that, you know, they were up for this game. Keep in mind, there was an interesting time where Tommy DeVito, he got hurt. I believe it was in the beginning of the second quarter or near the middle of the first. Tommy DeVito, he had to step out for a minute out of the game because to seek medical attention. And then Rex Culpepper came in the game, and in 2 plays, he threw a dot of a touchdown pass. He threw one big touchdown to receiver, I believe it was Taj Harris. It was honestly a wonderful touchdown throw. Like, it was, people kept saying that because of the hair and stuff, he looked like, you know, Trevor Lawrence. Of course, he looked like Trevor Lawrence in physically, but he went 4 for 9, only 88 yards, and touchdown, which was the only touchdown he scored in the game. And it was weird because Tommy DeVito ended up coming back in the game, but I feel like they probably should have rolled the dice with Culpepper. You know, sometimes that sort of thing kind of energizes your team, and that definitely helps in the long term. Unfortunately, they just couldn't get it going on offense altogether. You know, as a team, offensively, they didn't have all the stuff that they needed to have, and that hurts, right? That does hurt. Their offense wasn't clicking 100%. They only had 171 total yards offensively, 120 yards passing. And just to keep that in mind, most of those yards passing did not come from DeVito, their starting quarterback. It came from Mr. Culpepper, and that hurts. That hurts when your starter cannot get the job done. And it's going to be a tough scene for the Syracuse Orange for some time right now, because they got to figure out what exactly is their method of attack, because the run game was not doing well, even though they had 34 rushing attempts. So testament to their defense. The Panthers defense really held them in check running the ball. But 34 rushing attempts is a good amount of number, you know. But unfortunately, 51 rushing yards is just never going to cut it. And that's really the bottom line about that, is just that you can't expect to win games when you're averaging less than basically a yard per carry. That's never going to do you well, and it's always going to come back to bite you. And speaking of coming back to bite you, I got to tell you, that Georgia Tech win from last week that ended up looking like Georgia Tech was figuring some things out. Well, they took a little bit of a step back. Of course, UCF handled business against Georgia Tech, and it was not pretty. So Georgia Tech started out in that first quarter showing some momentum. They had some things, but then a lot of turnover issues started to come and appear, and you could obviously see where things stand when it comes to putting in guys who are true freshmen and guys who are, you know, seasoned. So like Dylan Gabriel comes in, I believe this is his 3rd year, 4 touchdowns, 417 yards, 1 interception. he just handled his business. The interception wasn't the best, but he did what he needed to do. And Jeff Sims, although he dropped back or he threw the ball 36 times, only 18 completions, 244 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He also had some fumbles or some balls loose and a lot of turnovers. And like last week, he had some as well. So that's not great. He did have 82 yards rushing and a touchdown. So, he can do it with his arm and the legs. But right now, the decision making and protecting the football is going to be the number one priority for this Georgia Tech offense, as the defense tried to do as much as they could. And in the beginning, against UCF, they definitely held their own for a little bit before it just got to the point where they're just getting put in bad situations, man. And UCF handled business. They have a lot of weapons, of course, and you can obviously see that just looking at their stat line. Marion Williams, 10 receptions, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns. Trey Nixon, 4 receptions for 94, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Robinson, 6 receptions, 105 touchdowns. They just threw the ball all over the place. And Otis Anderson, 18 carries, 88, a touchdown. Just a lot of skill position players on UCF, and they're not afraid to unleash when they get the opportunity to. So that is definitely something that always should be looked as a positive for UCF. Their offense has been consistent for quite some time, and that's going to be a win that propels them, a little bit in the power ranking. Now, granted, Ohio State and them boys, they're coming back in the rankings. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So I don't know just how far people are going to be moving up and down in the rankings, but for the most part, the guys who needed to handle business handled business. Oklahoma State, they struggled a bit against Tulsa, and Tulsa just wasn't great offensively at all today, but neither really was Oklahoma State. They had some issues. Chuba Hubbard, 27 carries, 93 yards and a touchdown. He had some big plays, but for the most part, things just weren't always working out. Zach Smith, as a passer, it was a rough day for Tulsa, and there were some mistakes going on. People couldn't hear whistles. The games got a little bit, sloppy. And I think the games will tighten up as they go, but I also think that revolves around the coaching and all of that. Like, there was a lot of sloppiness in the early games that, kind of dulled them down a bit for me personally. But the games that did end up being fun, like Miami versus Louisville, Miami had a really good win against Louisville. And Louisville, for the most part, wasn't in that game. Like, the score doesn't really reflect how that game looked like, because at a certain point, it was predestined. Miami was going to come and win that game. Basically, from the middle of the third quarter onward, that game was finished. The game was done. Miami was all over the place defensively and offensively. Bringing the spread to South Florida was a godsend. They needed it. De'Aaron King, he looks like the guy that they thought they were going to get. And right now he's passing the eye test. Not with flying colors, but, he's passing the eye test. And that is something that I think many Miami fans could be really happy about. And Louisville still has basically the same issues it always has. Their defense has not been the focal point of what they do. And unfortunately, their offense couldn't keep up with Miami. And that was just the end all be all of that. Clemson, what they did to Citadel was not fair. Honestly, it wasn't even funny what just happened to Clemson, or what happened to the Citadel. Trevor Lawrence and the gang, it was honestly domination. 8 for 9, 168 and 3 touchdowns for Trevor Lawrence. Travis Etienne, 8 carries for 68. Just not even fair. It shouldn't even have been that way. Notre Dame handled business against South Florida, of course, so they're going to be moving up in the rankings in their own right. And Marshall got a nice win against Appalachia State, 17-7. So that's one of the big upset of the week so far is that Cincinnati handled business against Austin Peay, and those are your bigger games. So the ACC still keeps trucking along, and some people had bye weeks and such, and of course some cancelizations and postponements. So of course Charlotte and North Carolina was canceled due to some COVID restrictions, and then also postponed was BYU versus Army. So some things they're going to come back, and we'll wait and see what that happens. But so far, I like to know what you guys think of the season so far. So week 3 through 3 weeks of college football, what I've been seeing is a few things. One, defenses are starting to pick back up. It wasn't like barn burners were happening all across the college football atmosphere, but there was just like tackling has been a weird thing in the NFL and in college football, and I feel like tackling is starting to get cleaned up a bit. I think that offenses are starting to get back in a rhythm. They're practicing more, they're getting more acclimated with each other's players and things like that. Run heavy teams are still pretty dominant. Pass heavy teams still have some have some things to work out the kinks. And, at the end of the day, control of possession and being able to capitalize on others' mistakes will always be the number one thing that the good football teams do. And so far through the first 3 weeks, I think that Notre Dame, Clemson, with North Carolina, I got to see one more game out of them to really see what they look like. Miami has looked really good. The AAC or the ACC has had some solid play, and I'm excited to see what else they bring to the table. And it makes me excited to see what the SEC has to offer, because I can't wait to see what they do. We're going to be talking about the SEC previews coming up, because they're about to start playing real soon. So we're going to take our first break and get into that. GSMC. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, we're back, GSMC College Football Nation. We're about to get into week 4, what to look for in the FBS, and more specifically, what's going to happen as the SEC has joined the fight. Anybody some Smash Bros fans, man? That iconic Smash Brothers Brawl theme. Even though the game, people didn't really like Brawl that much comparative, of course, to Melee and even to Smash Ultimate, but what they did give us in that theme in the beginning of the game is priceless. But yeah, man, we got some SEC play right now. This week is coming. ESPN. It's going to be awesome, man. Number 5, Florida against Ole Miss, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, ESPN National TV. It is going to be must see, because I'm interested to see what Florida has to offer. Unfortunately, I don't think rivalries are going to happen in the SEC, man. So we won't get a Florida-Miami game. That'd be crazy. I mean, it'd be a Florida-Georgia game, but it'd be cool to see Florida-Miami, man. That would be this year. This would be cool to see a Florida-Miami year. But, yeah, Florida against Miami. Florida has a lot of expectations coming out. Ole Miss is a team that is trying to get back within, contentions and in the thoughts of many, many other national fans rather than just the SEC West. But, there's no slouch. No slouches in the SEC for the most part, except for, one team. But the SEC has a lot of power, and we all know the SEC identifies with certain things, even though in recent years, that identity of pushing the ball down people's throats and good defense has kind of seen its way weaving in and out year in, year out, depending on the team you're talking about, right? Like Auburn, as I should probably say. I've been growing up here in Georgia my whole life. Sometimes Auburn just doesn't always work. Auburn is the pronunciation, but I sometimes say Auburn. Like Auburn. It just rolls off the tongue easier for me sometimes. But you know what I mean. Number 23, Kentucky versus Auburn. It's going to be an interesting day for Auburn to prove and get a good win, because Auburn needs as much help as they possibly can to keep moving up in the rankings. And I predict that they're going to have a really good season this year. They're going to be my team to watch out of the SEC, to make sure, at least out of the ones that I want to cover a lot, so that way I can see who exactly they are as a team and to see if they can push the envelope and move around. Number 13, UCF plays Eastern Carolina, so that's going to be a kind of like a gimme game for them. Give them a tune-up game, as some people like to call it. Notre Dame goes up against Wake Forest, and if we remember what we saw against Clemson, Wake Forest is not just the easiest out in the world, especially in the beginning. If things start to if you don't have a good start against Wake Forest, they can make things a little bit difficult on you. Of course, Notre Dame has a lot of talent, especially up front on the offensive line, and their running back, sophomore, he looks to be a guy who is going to really tear it up in the next few seasons. And if they can get going early offensively, then I think Notre Dame will have that game easily in the bag. Kansas State is going to be at Oklahoma, and it's going to be on Fox at 12. And I expect that game to basically play out just how any other Big 12 game would really play out for Oklahoma. I have no reason to think that a Lincoln Riley offense is not going to figure out a way to put up points. So I expect Oklahoma to handle business at home and do what they need to do. There is a Georgia Southern at Raging Cajuns Louisiana game on ESPN2 at 12. So that is another early start game that I think will be interesting to see. I think Louisiana should be proud of where they are. And I think that they're going to hold this new ranking with pride, and they're going to keep fighting to keep it and keep going undefeated, man. So I got to keep seeing what they do. They're a little bit wonky, a little bit leaning on all phases of football. It's not just offense doing all the scoring. They got some special teams in week 1. And then they leaned in and had to gut one out in the second week. Or in the third week, I should say, week 3, but their second game. So Louisiana, man, they're trying to get it done. Louisville, number 24 now, plays 21 Pittsburgh. That's going to be an interesting game because Pittsburgh's offense didn't look the greatest comparative to what they played against. And Louisville's defense didn't look the greatest. So we'll see what happens here, who cracks first, and who is able to really put a drive together and get some good momentum. I think it's going to be one of those games where momentum is going to take the cake. Georgia Tech Georgia Tech will be at Syracuse. That game will be on ESPN3 itself, actually. So I'm mistake. The Pittsburgh game will be on the ACC network, and the Syracuse game against Georgia Tech will be on ESPN3. Other marquee games around the week. LSU plays Mississippi State at LSU at 3:30 on CBS, like they usually do. LSU is ranked 6th right now. I want to see what LSU has to offer. As you know, a lot of people have opted out. There's been a lot of things going on as far as COVID is concerned for fans in the stands to what's been going on in the locker rooms, So LSU has a lot of adversity. They already lost a lot of players due to the draft. They lost a lot of coaching staff due to different hirings. It's a whole new LSU team, but the same ideals hopefully will apply, and we'll see what Ed Orgeron is able to do with this team. And, they're the defending national champs. They're going to want to try and defend that title the best way they can, even if their rankings are a little bit outside of where they would like to be. We have a number 8 Texas going up against Texas Tech on Fox. Again, 3:30. That's going to be a big game. There's so many games that are going to be so fun to watch. Number 22 Army at Cincinnati. That's going to be a good game. West Virginia plays Oklahoma State, ranked 15th in the nation. Number 4 Georgia plays against Arkansas at 4 o'clock on the SEC network. Duke plays Virginia. We have Alabama versus Missouri week 1. That is going to be at 7 on ESPN. Of course, we're going to have a lot of games from the SEC being on ESPN this year. Get ready for it. Tennessee plays 7:30 South Carolina, the Gamecocks, at the Gamecock Stadium at William Bryce Stadium. It's going to be on the SEC network itself. Honestly, the biggest game of the week, I think, is probably going to be that I guess since it's 2 ranked teams, maybe Louisville, Pittsburgh, just because they're 2 ranked. Auburn's going to be probably the most watched game, just because Kentucky's ranked, Auburn's ranked. It's 12 o'clock on a Saturday. People are going to tune into that game when they can, even though it's on the SEC network. A lot of people have them out here in the South, so I think it's going to be one of the bigger televised games of the week. And I think that Texas game is going to be big time. Texas, facing Texas Tech on Fox, so you don't have to go through the Longhorn Network. People are going to want to see what Ellinger is able to do. I want to see what Ellinger is able to do. Florida State versus Miami on ABC at 7:30. I want to see how Miami faces Florida State, and if they're as dominant as they're starting to look really in the ACC. Yeah, man, a lot of great games going on this week. I really hope that the SEC isn't behind. I really hope the SEC isn't behind in play. So that's my biggest concern, is how the SEC will look, basically being only a little under a month behind all the other conferences that have been playing. And what we saw in the beginning of the weeks with these other conferences, that things were getting a little bit slow. Teams' offenses weren't as, crisp as they could have been in a week 1, usually because of limited practice time, limited amount of time they were able to practice, delays, people missing practices because of COVID related things. And that happens, that happened, and that does matter for majority of a lot of these teams. And the SEC had a lot of issues, especially in the Deep South, where a lot of these areas where these teams are placed were having some pretty bad outbreaks of COVID-19. And in their own regions, in their own universities, they were having bad outbreaks on the teams. So they had to stop some and delay some workouts. And maybe that has hurt them in some way. We'll have to wait and see. But I want to see how these offenses come out. I want to see how these defenses look. Are they tackling as well as we expect them to tackle in the SEC? And are some of these top teams that we expect to be good, are they actually going to show glimpses and show signs of what they're capable of? Because I don't believe any team right now, maybe outside of Clemson, looks like a well-oiled machine. Everybody's still working out kinks. Everybody's still trying to get it together and figure out what they need to do to be successful this year. And that is always going to be the biggest thing, is like, how do you sustain success in college football? And one of the biggest things is taking each week at 1 week at a time, because think about it, it's really difficult to have a winning streak, to just keep winning. College football is the only place where you can lose once and then the season is basically, it's not done, right? You have bowl games, but if you have aspirations for greater, you cannot lose. You cannot afford a loss. You cannot afford a game to drop, right? You have to go out and try to run the table every year. Alabama has to try and go run the table every year. Auburn has to go try and run the table every year. Georgia has to run the table every year just to win the SEC championship game. Or else if they lose the championship game, it's very possible that they're out of the playoff. Like, the SEC has a really tough time dealing with the fact that they are in a conference that typically eats each other alive. It's like piranhas that only eat other piranhas. So, going up against in the SEC West, you have so many good teams, and you have any team ready to just knock you out. Like, nobody is holding back against any team there. There's no cupcake schedules. And when you're playing a SEC only schedule, it only elevates the states on that. So I'm sure Nick Saban, I'm sure Ed Orgeron, I'm sure I'm sure Jimbo Fisher even, right? And, these guys understand just exactly what's happening here. Like, this is going to be a big time year for them to display who they are as coaches. And it's a good measure for recruiting, right? When you think about it, if you're trying to recruit out of the SEC and you're facing an only SEC schedule and you dominate in your SEC, conference, you dominate in the Southeastern Conference facing only SEC opponents, you're not playing a bunch of cupcake teams, and you showcase some game, right? Let's say Mississippi State, they go, 10-0, whatever, and they get to the championship game. That makes a big statement on recruits. You say, we faced all of these challenges in a really, really tough year, played a full SEC schedule, and we dominated. That goes a long way, I feel. That definitely goes a long way in recruiting, and I think everybody's just trying to seize this opportunity and make the best out of a situation that, nobody really wants. Nobody asked for this, but here we are. And it's going to make a lot of things more different, like a lot of things interesting. The SEC East has a little bit more competition than it has in years prior. So Georgia's not going to be able to cakewalk themselves into the college football playoff, potentially. Florida's giving them a run for their money this year, as some people might think. And not only that, we have to assume that Georgia is going to be able to perform. And once you start assuming things can get out of hand. Like, we all assumed the Dallas Cowboys was going to be amazing offense this year. And sometimes they had weird times, right? Just like that. No shade to Cowboys fans. Your boy Dak helped me out in fantasy this week. But we're going to take our final break and we're going to move on to the rankings through week 3 and then potentially what's going on in week 4 and wrap up the podcast. GSMC.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we're back. GSMC College Football Nation. We're going back and looking at what changes happened in the AP polls, and the big polls, man. The big AP. No Adrian Peterson, no all day. He had his run in college. We're looking at, the AP poll. So, number 1, Alabama Crimson Tide in the AP poll. So watching Alabama play the last few seasons with Tua Tagovailoa slinging the ball all over the field was a bit surreal. And while the Crimson Tide should again be explosive on offense in 2020, it's the defense that looks a lot closer to what Alabama defensive have traditionally looked like under Nick Saban. Up front, LeBron Ray is primed for a big season after a foot injury sidelined him a year ago, and Dylan Moses is back on the inside linebacker position, and Patrick Surtain II has a chance to be one of the best cornerbacks the Tide has produced under Nick Saban's regime. And if you're looking for an impact freshman, outside linebacker Will Anderson Jr. has been impressive as anybody on defense in the preseason thus far. And they play Missouri, of course, this coming Saturday, 7 p.m. ESPN Eastern Standard Time on that 7 p.m. Number 2 on the rankings is the Ohio State Buckeyes. So they're hoping to get the band back together as they point toward their opener against Nebraska and another run at the national championship. Cornerback Shaun Wade and offensive lineman Wyatt Davis, both projected first-round NFL draft picks, are planning to return after initially opting out of the season. And when you throw in quarterback Justin Fields, good luck finding any quarterback / offensive line / cornerback trifecta on one team in college football. And they play Nebraska October 24th. That is to be announced as far as the timing. And it's a shame that, Nebraska was the one with the leaks. And now, of course, they have to face Ohio State. So that's your corporal punishment from, the big wigs upstairs. So Clemson moves down a couple spots. So 2 weeks ago into the season, Clemson has yet to break a sweat after beating the Citadel 49-0. And that's not to diminish how good or how talented the Tigers are, but it's because obviously that they're one of the top teams in college football and extremely well coached. Trevor Lawrence is going to make a lot of opposing defenses look bad this season, but as you look down the Tigers' schedule, they might not truly be tested until their trip to Notre Dame on November 7th, especially when you consider that 4 of their next 5 games are at home. That is a quite hefty, large advantage. They play Virginia this week, they play Virginia October 3rd. The time is to be announced, so that'll be in a few weeks. Oklahoma is at 4, so it was the FCS foe Missouri State, and yes, Oklahoma was going to win big regardless of how redshirt freshman Spencer Rattler performed in his first career start 2 weeks ago. But what was so pleasing to OU fans was how comfortable he looked, and whether that was throwing the ball down the field with precision or executing a screen pass for a touchdown, Rattler is going to face stiffer competition going forward, but to nobody's surprise, the Sooners should just be fine. They should be just fine at the quarterback position once again. They play Kansas State, like I said earlier, Saturday at noon on Fox. Number 5 is Notre Dame. So nobody can beat up on the Fighting Irish for not racking up enough style points in week 2. And after a so-so performance in a season-opening win against Duke, Notre Dame looked every bit the part of a national title contender on Saturday in a 52-0 dismantling of South Florida, even without multiple defensive starters. One of the more impressive things about the Irish thus far is that they have a wealth of impact players on both sides of the ball, and it's hard not to like the balance that Brian Kelly has created. They play Wake Forest this Saturday, noon Eastern Time, ABC. Number 6 is Georgia, so you're probably not going to get Kirby Smart to compare this Georgia defense or any defense that he's had in Athens to some of the ones he coached in Alabama, as many of those Tide defenses were filled with players now playing in the NFL. But what jumps out about this Georgia defense is the speed and playmaking ability at just about every position. Does that sound familiar? Out of 19 defenders who played at least 200 snaps last season for the Dogs, 14 of them returned to this defense. So their defense is looking to be very stout. They play Arkansas this Saturday, 4 p.m. SEC Network. Number 7, right underneath them is Florida. In the SEC, it's typical that you haven't done the Dogs a program, or that Dogs a program. In Florida's case, that's not beating Georgia, and that's not getting to the SEC championship. for 3 straight years. But Dan Mullen has been building this to this point, and he won 10 games his first season, 11 games last season. This should be his most balanced team yet, and with redshirt senior quarterback Kyle Trask returning and the talented defense that brings back 8 starters, something else working in the Gators' favor is not having to face Alabama during the regular season. So they play Ole Miss Saturday, noon Eastern Standard Time on ESPN. Number 8, Texas Longhorns. So overreaction is always tempting at first game, but senior quarterback Sam Ehlinger looked plenty comfortable spreading the ball around in Texas's 59-3 passing of UTEP last week, and he did so with guys who didn't play starring roles last year. So Ehlinger is experienced enough that he doesn't need to depend on 1 or 2 guys, which should pay big dividends for the Longhorns this season in an offensive system designed to spread the wealth. They play Texas Tech 3:30 p.m. on Fox, so no Longhorn Network this time around. Number 9 is the Penn State Lions. So if anyone or anybody is going to unseat Ohio State in the Big Ten this season, it's going to be Penn State. The Lions have pieces in play to be real factor for national championship. Of course, their talent pool just keeps on getting deeper under James Franklin. If quarterback Sean Clifford takes off in the new offensive coordinator Kirk Casaroka's system, and especially if star linebacker Micah Parsons returns after analogy opting out, the showdown at Ohio State for the second week of the season in Haight Valley looms as one of the games of the year. They play Indiana October 24th, to be announced. LSU is 10th on the list, and delay in starting the season in the SEC might end up working in LSU's favor after all. They got back defensive lineman Neil Farrell Jr. this week after he previously opted out for the season, and Ed Orgeron left the door open so that other players could change their mind if they decided to play this season. Either way, there's a new look to this LSU football team, and from coordinators to players, but Orgeron and his staff are confident that recruited well enough that the defending national champions won't face a major drop-off. They play Mississippi State this Saturday. Number 11 is Texas A&M, so much of the attention in College Station has been focused on quarterback Kellen Mond and what kind of step he takes this season, but he is going to need his pass catchers to step it up. And the Aggies' leading returning wideout, Jamon Osborne, he announced last week that he was opting out for the season, and that Cameron Buckley is out for the season with a torn ACL. That means Mond won't have anybody returning at the wide receiver position who caught more than 3 passes last season. And the good news is that tight end Jaden Weidemeyer and running back Isaiah Spiller are 2 of the SEC's most promising sophomores in the game. So hopefully they're going to be able to be impact players for them, so that way it softens the blow that the wide receiver group has given them so far. Number 12 is Wisconsin. So consistency in Wisconsin football have been synonymous underneath Paul Christ, and in his 5 seasons in Madison, the Badgers have won 10 or more games. And for those campaigns, the formula for the most part will stay the same in 2020, beating teams up on defense. And even though linebackers Zach Bond and Chris Orr are gone, Wisconsin returns just about everybody else on the defense from a year ago and should be as good, if not better, against the run after finishing 6th nationally a year ago. They play Illinois on October 24th. Number 13 is UCF. So everybody in and around college football is rooting for Mackenzie Milton to get back onto the field as he continues to fight back from a catastrophic knee injury he suffered in 2018. And as Milton continues that fight, his replacement at quarterback and hometown buddy Dylan Gabriel is playing super football after passing for 3,653 yards and 39 touchdowns last season as a freshman. Gabriel torched Georgia Tech for 417 yards and 4 TDs Saturday in UCF's season opening game against the Yellow Jackets. Number 14 is Miami. So 2 games into the 2020 season, Houston transfer quarterback De'Aaron King has clearly made a difference in Miami's offense, but so has first-year offensive coordinator Rhett Lashley, and the Hurricanes went on the road Saturday night and carved apart Louisville. So a 47-34 drubbing, basically. Like, it was not close for the most part. And in doing so, they showcased the kind of offensive balance and explosive plays that they've been lacking in Coral Gables for the past few seasons. And Derek King passed for 325 yards, 3 TDs. The Hurricanes averaged 5.3 yards per rush, scored 3 touchdowns of 47 yards or longer. So they were definitely getting big time plays. Number 15 is the Auburn Tigers. The Tigers lost a lot of good players in the secondary from a year ago. So it wasn't just that the defensive line, where they had some key personnel losses, but keep in mind that junior safety Jamie Sherwood, who has been hard missed this preseason, in Kevin Stee's defense. Sherwood's first start last season came at LSU, where he had 10 tackles and recovered a fumble. The 6'2", 220-pound Sherwood would be one of the top breakout defenders in the league this season. Number 16 is Michigan. The Wolverines. There won't be any easing into the 2020 season for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines. They will open the season on the road against Minnesota, which has the firepower on offense to test any defense. Speaking of defense, Michigan got some good news last week when star defensive end Kwity Paye said he would play this season, and Paye had 12.5 tackles for loss, including 6.5 sacks in his first full season as a starter at defensive end a year ago, and he projects as one of the top edge defenders in college football and will be the cornerstone of the Wolverines defense. Number 17 is the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. They move up a couple spots, and you could see it coming with Louisiana after the Raging Cajuns opened the season by taking down nationally ranked Iowa State on the road, making their own move into the rankings and receiving a ton of fanfare along the way. They were primed for the upset on Saturday and trailed by 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. But to their credit, they found a way to claw back and beat Georgia State 34-31 in overtime on Elijah Mitchell's 12-yard touchdown run. 2 weeks into the season, Bill Napier's club has been one of college football's best stories thus far. Number 18 is the Cincinnati Bearcats. So it was way too early to start making a strong case for a group of 5 team, or the best group of 5 team in college football, but Cincinnati should certainly be in the conversation. The Bearcats, coming off back-to-back 11-win seasons, opened the 2020 season on Saturday with a 55-20 routing of Austin Peay, and they might have found a new go-to guy on offense. Number 19 is the North Carolina Tar Heels. So the game against Charlotte on Saturday was postponed after the 49ers announced that they had too many players out due to contact tracing protocols and safety play. This means that North Carolina won't play again until the first weekend in October, after opening the season to a 31-6 win over Syracuse, a victory that spotlighted UNC's defense, equipped it to pick up the slack even when sophomore quarterback Sam Howell doesn't have his best stuff. And that's good news for the Tar Heels going forward. Number 20 is Oklahoma State, the Cowboys. So just what everybody expected from the Cowboys this season. They're going to grind games out on defense. And, well, maybe not. It's a good thing that Oklahoma State defense came to play on Saturday in the opener, the 16-7 escape against Tulsa. The Cowboys trailed at the half after starting quarterback Spencer Sanders went down with an injury to his lower right leg and didn't return. And then true freshman Shane Illingsworth was the third quarterback to play for Oklahoma State and gave the Cowboys a spark with some key completions late in the third quarter, but they never found any rhythm on offense, and star running back Chuba Hubbard was unable to get on track. Hopefully that changes for them. Number 21 is Minnesota. So the Golden Gophers, if somebody not named Wisconsin, is going to win the Big Ten West Division this season. Keep an eye out for PJ Fleck's Golden Gophers, who won 11 games a year ago. Their chances to win the division will go up considerably if star wide receiver Rashawn Bateman receives a waiver from the NCAA to be able to play this season after initially opting out and signing with an agent. We won't have to wait long to get a feel for the Minnesota team. The Golden Gophers open the season at home against Michigan. Number 22 is Tennessee. The Vols picked up a major win on the field last week when NCAA approved Cade Mays waived to play immediately this season after transferring from Georgia. The SEC still had to clear Mays' transfer within the league, and if Mays gets the green light from the SEC, Tennessee should be as good as it's been in the offensive line in a long time, especially with all SEC performer Trey Smith back at guard. Mays played every position on the line last season for Georgia. Number 23 is the TCU Horned Frogs. So with SMU game being postponed, TCU has some extra time, but some much needed time to sort out this quarterback situation. Max Dugan has yet to be cleared after undergoing a procedure to correct a heart condition. Sophomore Matthew Downing also has missed some practice time, but Gary Patterson said that the Horned Frogs should be at full strength by the opener. Winning that game against Iowa State will be critical for TCU, especially with two of the Frogs' first three games in October coming against Texas and Oklahoma. Number 24 is the Kentucky Wildcats. Replacing a player as dynamic as Lynn Bowden Jr. will be difficult and a challenge. But the Wildcats are optimistic that there'll be more balance on offense if quarterback Terry Wilson can stay healthy and after tearing a patellar tendon in his left knee last season. Some new faces need to emerge as wide receiver, and Josh Ali is somebody who would really come on during his senior season. So finding consistency in the passing game will be very important for them. And finally, number 25 is the Pittsburgh Panthers. And it was a little too sloppy for their coach's liking, especially some of the penalties, but it was worked hard at the building the kind of culture in Pittsburgh where the Panthers can win league games even when they don't play their best. The 21-10 victory on Saturday versus Syracuse marked their first time since 2016 that Pittsburgh had started the season 2-0. The defense, the staple under Narduzzi, is going to give the Panthers a chance every game, and they have to keep growing on offense, though they will face a telltale stretch over the next 3 weeks against Louisville, NC State, and Boston College. So there you have it. That is your new top 25, including the Big Ten. It's been the GSMC College Football Podcast, baby. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Don't forget, like, subscribe, rate the podcast, review it. Don't forget to follow us on social media as well. Facebook, Twitter, GSMC College Football. This is Ethan speaking, and I'll see you all next week. Peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.